Welcome to episode 103 of the Minding Your Business podcast, brought to you by the Binge podcast network, the Binge at onabinge.com. Check out the exclusive content from all the Binge podcast network shows, from The Startup Life, Nothing But Buckets, Let's Be Real, Just Blurtin', and so forth, including the Minding Your Business podcast. So make sure you check that out at onabinge.com. Of course, we're brought to you by Brooks Brothers Consulting, brooksbrothersconsulting.com. If you're interested in getting in touch with private lending, or if you're interested in leveling up the frontline area of your community bank, make sure that you go to brooksbrothersconsulting.com or call us at 901-878-2727. Again, we're episode number 103 here on August the 9th, 2019. What do we do?
What we do here is go back.
All right. Thank you so much for joining on today. I'm your host, Champ Ron. This is the Minding Your Business podcast. So glad to be coming to you once again with episode 103. It's been a phenomenal week. Hope it's been the same for you, with no obstacles and no downfalls. We are here Friday, again, the 9th. The year's just flying by, man. It's been a crazy week. A lot of great things going on. Looking forward to an upcoming business trip. And even with all the challenges that the environment faces, keep your head up, keep progressing forward. Your time is definitely coming. Today's episode, what I want to get into is a few different things. The main topic is going to be the other side of the side hustle. But first, let's get into Ron's rundown. So in my rundown today, we're going to get into a few topics here on episode number 103, which is brought to you by, again, the Binge Podcast Network. Shout out to Dominic Lawson of the Startup Life Podcast and Owls LLC. Make sure you check out all episodes of the Startup Life Podcast, wherever you get your podcast content. Number one on the rundown, FedEx. So FedEx this week decided no mas on Amazon. Of course, it took them a while to see that Amazon was doing the same damn thing that they're doing, which is they are getting into home delivery, which they've been for at least about a year and a half now. But FedEx this week won't be renewing its ground delivery contract with Amazon. Amazon has started its own delivery service, as I mentioned. To counter that, the loss in sales, which FedEx is stating would be about 1.3% of its sales come through Amazon. I thought it was a little higher, but we'll go with that. That's what they say. FedEx is going to 7-day delivery in January, and they're expanding their delivery capabilities. So watch out between the battle between FedEx and Amazon, and it'll be interesting to see over time how that impacts FedEx in terms of even going to extra day delivery on Sundays. How does that go cost wise versus revenue will be extremely interesting. Number two, Samsung. Samsung has launched now Galaxy Note 10 for those that are Android fans. I'm not an Android guy. I'm an iPhone guy. I've gone between the two. I like the iPhone, but for those that like the Galaxy, they got the Galaxy 10 and the 10 Plus for you. It doesn't have a headphone jack. So if you're in the business of selling headphones that has a headphone that plugs into the headphone jack, it's going to be very interesting for you and for your business going forward, because none of these phones, including mine, I've got the iPhone XR, I believe is what it is. It doesn't have a headphone jack. So you have to use the headphones that come with Apple that plug into the same component that the charger plugs into. Or you have to use Wi-Fi, which Wi-Fi headphones are the big thing now. So it's probably not as big a deal anymore. And the headphone companies have well adjusted. Hope that you have too, again, if you're in that business. But from a IT standpoint, I was told that having that hollow point in your phone takes away from the size of the battery and blah, blah, blah. So Now that you don't have that, the battery can be bigger, which allows your phone to remain charged without needing charging a lot longer. So they can promote longer battery life, which is a big thing in the cell phone industry. Number 3, Lyft. Lyft's price war with Uber is starting to calm down, as you could expect. Revenues for both companies are up. So Lyft has actually increased their projections, as I guess some of their other more political dealings have also started to die down with them and with Uber to some extent. But people are using them a lot more. The revenue per ride is up, I believe, 22% per reports. And so we'll see how that continues to progress. Number 4, Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut and Walgreens. So Pizza Hut is closing 500 of their dine-in restaurants around the country as they look to right size and scale themselves, in this case, scaling down. Same with Walgreens, looking to close 200 stores with their now famous kind of quote of, and I'm paraphrasing here, but they're doing a cost-cutting measure here over the next several years, which is going to be very, very interesting. In both cases, with both companies, it may just be a case of oversaturation, as well as changing consumer behavior, other options and things like that. Online options are causing people to make these adjustments. Pizza Hut, doesn't necessarily need the dine-in piece because people are more into carry out and delivery. So it makes sense, I guess, to route your efforts more towards those areas as opposed to the dine-in restaurant, which is, when it comes to fast food like that, that's slowly starting to go away with Uber Eats and all the different delivery channels now for food because people don't want to get out and have to go do anything anymore. This week, author Toni Morrison passed away at age 88, and I'm going to share something real quick from her momentarily, but we're definitely looking at that. The country's still reeling from multiple mass shootings. That's been talked about to death. I'm not going to continue to do that on this particular podcast. We're not naive at all, but we know that there's plenty of channels that you can get that information if you just love the negativity of mass shootings. Because until people decide that they're going to do something about it, they're just going to continue. So it is what it is. If you're ready to do something about it, make sure come election time, you do what you need to do. Okay? So we'll talk about a quote from Toni Morrison here in a second. Something that was interesting this week, number 5, was Star Wars. So now the first Star Wars came out, I think, in 1977. They have another one coming out called The Rise of Skywalker that's coming out later this week. But studies are showing that kids aren't using the Force like the rest of us used to. I'm a borderline millennial Gen Xer myself at 38, so I grew up watching all the Star Wars movies, and I'll give you this. The original trilogy was certainly a lot better than things that they've done since. But it's difficult. There's so many more choices now than you had in the 80s when Star Wars came out and kids played with figurines and kind of ran around the neighborhood. They don't do that anymore. Now they sit and play video games, and there are no toys now. Everything's on a device. Like even my girls, they have, they don't have a ton of dolls and toys and figurines now. All they need is an iPad or, something like that, and they get everything that they want. So Star Wars is kind of starting to run its course, like most things. Nothing really lasts forever in that kind of sense. So we'll see. But they're putting a lot of pressure on this movie that's coming up this winter in December, called the Rise of Skywalker. So we'll see how that goes. But even the new ride at Disney, they were saying didn't perform to expectations, and now you see why. Millennials and Gen Z is really not feeling it. They're not using the Force, and those Jedi mind tricks aren't working on them like they did. Certainly baby boomers and Gen X and some, the early millennials. So anyway, that is the rundown for Ron's Rundown here on episode number 103. And now let's get into the topic today. The topic today is the other side of the side hustle. And I'm going to tackle this one today. I don't have a guest. As you guys know, this is a raw business show. There's no editing or anything like that. I just go from my experience. And I like to make sure that you as the audience, MYB community, understand that I bring a value too. I'm not just the maestro here rounding up guests, which is great for when you have a great interview type style show. But I've been in the game too. I didn't float in off the Mississippi River, and yeah, I've had some experiences too at a very high level, as you all are most certainly aware of by now if you've been rocking with the show for some time. So let me share with you kind of, the thoughts around the side hustle. Millennials and Gen Z, like I mentioned earlier in relation to Star Wars, something else that's changed, and you're probably well aware of this if you're in the workforce or maybe you've come out of the workforce. I've always said that many of today's entrepreneurs are basically vigilante entrepreneurs. What that means in my definition is these are folks that were let go or terminated from a job, and they vowed to take over the world one EIN number at a time by starting their own business because they didn't want to go back and be a clerk wherever they were at $12 and $13, $14 an hour, or a desk salesperson or something like that in a insurance agency or a bank or wherever. And so they decided to start their own business, which is great. All right. Or they're doing that and they've got their side hustle, whatever your mode of operation is. But in bigger terms, what people are seeing now is that the idea that you're going to go and work for an organization your entire career and be trained. And, there used to be this notion, and not even a notion, it used to be a reality, actually, that many CEOs started on the front line. I know for me in banking, there's plenty of examples of CEOs around the country who started as, part-time tellers or even full-time tellers or at the entry-level sales desk and progressed through their careers to make it to CEO, CFO, chairman of the board and whatnot. And you're not seeing that as much. Why? I could talk a whole hour as to all the different reasons, but just to break it down for you, MYB, the big reason why you don't have that type of progression anymore is because everybody's become so damn fickle. And not only fickle, but nobody wants to commit to anything. Companies don't want to commit to training people. People don't want to commit to going through the training to progress up. Everybody's got a short attention span and very light on patience. And because everybody's not playing nice in the sandbox with that, you create these different avenues where companies aren't committing to people anymore. So now the CEO isn't taking the time to groom his or her replacement, essentially, or whoever's coming up next in the organization. What companies have been doing for many years now, and even in decades, is they've just been snatching from each other. So they get a talented person, an A, B plus player, and they hope to give them an extra 10, 15 grand a year, maybe more, and try to snatch them from the competition. And that's what it's been for a while now. It's this stark competition in the community, business community, with companies of just plucking talent. Nobody's grooming talent because, again, nobody wants to commit. Nobody wants to commit to, I'm going to train this talent or help them get through school so they can leave and go across the street. Companies don't want to do that. People are now to the point, they were a little slower than companies were. Companies were quicker. They saw what's coming out of the 80s and 90s and they jumped on it. You know what I mean? But for people, we tend to be a little slower to the trough on that. And so this generation of people now, Gen Z, that's starting to enter the workforce, millennials that are, again, kind of those early phases of the workforce, and even Gen X, which is, sometimes kind of left behind. But Gen X is getting squeezed in it because they've got, on one side, you got millennials and Gen Z coming in, and then you've got the bottleneck at the top with baby boomers who haven't retired at the rate that their predecessors did. So they're not retiring at 60 and 65. They stayed in mostly because of 2008 and the downturn. And there's some other factors. They're living longer and they're getting to the point where they don't just want to, they're not going to sit at home and watch Maury, right? And there's only so much golf you can play, and there's only so many beachfront houses, and then you got to deal with all that, So there's just a lot of hassle with things now that are keeping people in the game, and they love what they do. They love the power, they love the money, and whatnot. So, all that is contributing to this huge bottleneck where there's not a lot of trust and there's not a lot of, there's not a lot of loyalty, I guess, around for people working jobs or for companies. And so here's what I've proposed, and I've seen this proposed in writing by different authors and whatnot, and I agree. The side hustle where many of you who have side hustles, you hide it from your employer. A lot of that, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of you, share things. You have different social media handles for this, and you block settings. You block friends. You block coworkers. You block bosses. You don't use LinkedIn because you haven't figured out how to block people on there yet, and you don't want to because then you don't want anybody to share it and get it to your boss and that sort of thing. So. A lot of that fear comes from, again, this lack of trust and lack of loyalty. But so anyway, many of you have started side hustles with the idea or the hope and the prayer or really the plan, depending on where you are. You've done that looking to transition from the workplace, typically. You look at your job and, many people don't care for their job. They don't like the hours. They sure as hell don't always like the pay. They don't like the scope. They don't like coworkers. They don't like the boss or supervisor. They don't like the benefits or lack thereof. They don't like the health coverage, whatever it is. They don't like the location of it, the scope of work that they're doing, the lack of upward mobility. There's a lot of things they don't like. And so they have side hustles to try to supplement their income, hopefully, or just allow them to do something that they really want to do, but they can't do or don't feel they're in a position to do because of debt, usually. That's usually the big thing that's the ball and chain around people's ankles is debt, student loan debt, mortgage, childcare, utilities and water, loans that are owed from the past, car notes. So all these different things that add up in their expenses. And so younger generations are seeing this and they're saying, wait a minute, we're not impressed by owning all this stuff. Right? And that's not saying all of them are, but many of them are saying, listen, it's too much hassle to own cars and own houses. They're not the assets that you thought they were, baby boomer, right? That you found out in '08, where things can be manipulated. So these kids saw people lose their shirt, and they saw it and read all the stories, and they studied it in school. And so now they're not doing that. And so what they're also not doing is trusting companies to say, I'm going to go work for you, Mr. and Miss Company, for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 40, 45 years of my career. Why? Because I just don't trust that you're going to have my best interest in mind. You're more likely to just fall in love and typecast me. And let me give you my analogy on typecasting, because, you hear that in Hollywood, right, with movies. Companies will do this to you. You do something very well at a company. So let's just say you're a salesperson and you do a great job of selling flash drives. You sell flash drives. You can explain it well. You get people to buy them by the dozens. USB flash drives. Companies that aren't innovative will typecast you. They see you as that, just like, Denzel Washington always being the hero. That's one of the things that made the movie Training Day with Denzel Washington and Ethan Hawke. One of the things that made it big was one of the first times that Denzel Washington played the villain in a movie, where normally he's the hero. He's the good-natured cop, or he's the attorney, or whoever, depending on the movie. Well, this time he was the villain. And so he got past some of that quote unquote typecast. That happens to many of us in the workplace. You get typecasted into this is what you do. And companies feel like this is all you'll do. Why? Because they don't want to invest in the training, because they don't want you to become great. Because if you become great, you're apt to leave, or the competitor is apt to slither in and steal you from them. And now they miss out on the benefit of that investment. Instead of taking the approach that not worry so much about competition, but worry about themselves and make sure they have the environment and infrastructure and the benefits to retain, everybody just thinks on acquiring new. That's why you see companies for years, many of us and those that fight for consumer rights and things like that, you see companies give all their discounts to new customers. Well, what about the guy that's been paying you for 10 years? Well, there's nothing for him. He's got to leave and then come back to get the discount. That's crazy. But again, it shows you the nature of that particular mentality. OK, so young people are not in the mix of, falling for the okie doke like past generations. Today's job scene is so wild. There's long hours. Companies coming out of '08, it's interesting. They didn't rehire positions. People would leave. They wouldn't rehire and that kind of thing. Some of you are working, 2 and 3 positions, in one job. You're getting paid one salary, but you're doing 2 or 3 people's positions or responsibilities. So you got low rates. You got really just zero job security. And that's the thing. There's just not the security when you look at it from an individual standpoint. OK. And like I mentioned earlier, supervisors all the way up to the CEO. There used to be this level of training. Now you really only see top companies, Fortune 500 companies, and some of them don't even invest in the same level of training. But there's just not the training. The companies don't take chances on people anymore. Though it used to be, CEO would take somebody under his or her wing and, groom them and bring them to meetings and let them complete reports. And there was this quote unquote pay your dues notion that you had in the workplace. And you knew that if you committed, so it was a competition thing. You want to be better than the guy in the cubicle across from you or the girl across from you, across the desk. And the early bird got the worm, meaning that the person that developed the fastest and at the right time and had the patience to kind of wait it out. And being young, like baby boomers were in their time in the say the 60s and 70s and 80s, when you're young, you've got time. That's your advantage. So you've got the time of waiting it out. And the CEO, when he or she got to be 55, 60, they were on their way out because you had great economy. Weather in Florida is great. Texas, California, you get your beach home and you're out and you've groomed the next person to come in. Well, that's not happening anymore. All right. So having your side hustle is starting to change the game. And so let me share this with you that came from a LinkedIn report in 2016. The average American worker career includes 15 job changes. Now think about that for a second, MYB. 15 job changes. That was in 2016. So who knows what that is now coming 3 years later. Getting to the C-suite's no longer kind of a linear pursuit anymore. It's more like a kind of a climb up a tree. You know what I mean? And when you look at that, if you take the tree analogy, each branch on the tree is a different level of skill set that the company doesn't give you anymore. You've got to go get on your own. Right? You've got to go get these skill sets on your own. My wife and I were talking the other night about just career stuff and, opportunities and me doing the business and her career. And, we talked about that of how in her field and things like that, companies aren't, in her industry, companies aren't doing as much training anymore like they used to. There used to be a time where a company would pay for you to go to this conference or pay for you to take this class and things like that. And they're just not doing that anymore. And that makes it frustrating for people when they don't have the opportunity to level up, because if you don't acquire the skills and there's not a way for you to acquire the skills, or you've got to pay for it out of pocket, then it puts you in kind of this precarious situation where you're not really getting satisfaction out of your career because you're not growing, you're not developing. It's very robotic at that point. You're kind of getting put in this, again, typecasted role, and you're expected to just do that and be great at it for as long as you can stand it, and as long as the company can get away with having you do it. So side hustles, now have become really MYB a critical way for young professionals to differentiate themselves in the workplace. So that's why I recommend to you is, again, read your audience, understand your audience, but as a best practice, don't hide your side hustle unless, of course, it's direct competition with your job, or certainly if it's connected to a competitor company to where you work. But don't hide that. Matter of fact, include that in your resume. The reason being is because there's so little training that when other companies see, everybody's looking for the quote unquote entrepreneurial mindset. People want self-starters and people who think in terms of dollars and cents and weighs cost benefit and is willing to take some level of risk with their career. One of the ways you take some risk is as a side hustle, because you're acquiring skills. Use me, for example, if I were kind of in the workforce in this way. Me having a podcast allows me to dive into media. I don't have a communications background, MYB. I don't have a speaking background other than being a public speaker myself that I've developed over time. But I don't have that background. And in banking, I wasn't going to get any kind of media communication speaking background. Whatever bank I would have been for would have loved for me to do nothing other than lead retail and business banking teams from now until infinity. Right. And the only training I might have got is if I was with a large bank where they've got, infrastructure and things like that to teach me. But they're not going to send me to classes for things outside of the scope of my position. So even a large bank, they're not going to pay for me to go into media and things like that, because when they look at my job description, I'm typecasted. Right. So the only way for me to branch out, if I want to do anything different, or if I want to expand and go up and get the skill sets that it takes to keep rising up that proverbial corporate ladder, I've got to invest in myself. And I've got to be willing to job hop. Many of you now that are listening to this podcast, you've been at your job 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 20 years. And the most you've gotten is anywhere from a 1 to 3, 4% raise every year. And you're waiting for to be promoted. And I'm just going to tell you, it's going to be hard because, again, think from the company standpoint. There's not the loyalty. And they've already paid for the knowledge that you have in between your ears. They've already paid for it. They're not going to pay more for it. They've already paid for it. Someone else will pay for what someone else has given you. Right? That's why business exists. Someone's willing to pay for the expertise, the time, the dedication, the knowledge, the resources that someone else, whether that someone else was you or someone else, another company, paid for. Why? Because it's cheaper. It's less expensive for me to pluck you from UPS and bring you to FedEx than it is for you to start at FedEx and me train you and you stay there on my payroll for 10 years. In their mind, there's a law of diminishing returns. So in your mind, there should also be a law of diminishing returns. You're going to see what I just say about the LinkedIn report. 15 job changes in your career. If your career starts at, let's just use a nice number, round odd number, 25. You get out of college and you're getting into your career at 25 and you're going to work, let's just see, 35, 45, 55, 65. That's 40 years. So you work till 70. That's 50 years. From 25 to 70. And what LinkedIn is predicting or stating that's happening now, and it's probably going to only increase, is that you would, in that 50 years, you would have changed jobs at a minimum 15 times. And I bet you that gets to 20. If it's not 20 today, it's probably heading quickly to 20, and it may surpass that. You've got to be willing, MYB, if you're in the workforce now and you want to be able to transition to your own company, or if you enjoy the workforce and you want to continue to do that and have an entrepreneurial approach and mindset in the corporate world, you're going to have to get comfortable with you're going to have to change jobs every 3 to 5 years. Because again, that law of diminishing returns, they're not paying to have you level up anymore. Now, if you want to do that, pay for that on your own and take classes on your own, go back and get your MBA and do that type of thing, that's great. But even getting your MBA may not mean as much to the company that you're with. It may mean more to the company that you're not with today. So your side hustle can actually help you develop your career if you play it right. How do you play it right, Ron? Well, again, one, you've got to share it on your resume, share it in interviews, things like that, and tie it to, here's the critical piece, MYB, tie it to the job description that you're going for and the job description that you've got now. For instance, I told you earlier about my banking background. This podcast allows me to dive into what? Speaking and what? Media. All right. I want to go for a communications position at a bank. I want to be in media marketing, right? Or whatever it is. I want to be a spokesman for the bank. I have a banking background and I go for that and I don't share with them that I do this podcast. What's going to happen in the interview is they're going to ask me about my communication. What have I done written? What have I done verbal? What have I led in front of a group of people? Along with my speaking tone and that sort of thing. My ability to communicate clearly and concisely. But by sharing with them that I have a podcast and allowing them to listen to the podcast, now I'm showcasing on my own that I've invested in my development by diving into media on my own. I'm not waiting on the company to come train me. Because it ain't going to happen. Okay? I might be the first person to break it to you, but it ain't going to happen. Not anytime soon. If you're not, now, if you're in marketing media and that sort of thing, you're in that role now, that's one thing. They'll train you all day to continue to develop that skill set. But if you're sitting in the cubicle now and you're responsible for customer service and you're responsible for moving papers down the line, or this product has to get on the shelf, or this logistic has to be managed and calculated and that sort of thing, and you want to get into media, or you want to get into education, or you want to get into whatever it is, that's not going to happen as much or as likely with your company now today. Now, I hate to break that to you, but MYB, that's the case. So what I'm recommending to you, I'm pleading with you, is don't let your loyalty and the fact that you're hiding your side hustle keep you stuck in a certain income range and typecasted as a certain type actor. Okay? Don't do that. Because otherwise you'll wake up one day, you'll be 25, and you'll wake up one day at 35 or 40, and you'll be wondering what the hell happened. I thought I've got this degree. I've got these student loans that I'm still paying on. Now I've had a kid or two or three. I've gotten married. And my whole life centers around debt. And I do a great job at work. I do this, whatever, fill in the blank stuff on the side with my time. But I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not moving. I'm stagnant. This may be an area you may need to reassess and listen to this particular podcast. And then share it with 5 or 10 of your friends and 6 or 7 of your enemies. You may need to do that because I'm telling you right now, this marketplace, again, is very fickle. It's stagnant. And people's mindsets are short on attention. And they're not investing. Unless they feel it's a very sure thing. People are very risk averse right now. Nobody wants to pull the trigger because nobody wants to get left holding the bag. Companies don't, you don't. So again, your side hustle, continue to work and the way to develop whatever you're doing on the side, if you're trying to develop a business while you're still working a job, and your job is your seed money for your company, or if you're looking to just do it, you're looking to supplement, and you're looking to say, hey, I make $50,000 or $55,000 at this job, and if I can make an extra, $250 a month, or an extra $500 a month, or an extra $1,000 or $1,500. If I could do that, that's a game changer for me. And so that's what I'm in it to do. If that's the case, still use your side hustle, the writing that you're doing on the side, and the marketing collateral that you're providing for business owners, and the babysitting service that you're doing, and all these different things that many of you do and quite frankly do a great job at. And you have a great passion around it. You enjoy mentoring. You enjoy helping youth and people with homework. You work with seniors and the elderly. There's all kinds of things. Maybe you've got not so much a restaurant, but maybe you've got a recipe for a dish that you sell on the side. You do cupcakes or, whatever it is that you do. Chocolate covered strawberries and things like that. So whatever it is that you do, share that because it's going to help you. There's skill sets that come with developing your side hustle. Like I mentioned, again, the example of the bank and this podcast. So there's skill sets that you develop over time that is part of your overall experience. Use it. Don't hide it. Now, if you got a boss that you're concerned about is, going to get jealous hearted and is, extremely old school and not thinking about innovation and that sort of thing, you have to read that on yourself. And you know that much better than I do, MYB. So tread how you need to tread if that's the thing. But most people, they're starting to develop now that as long as your side hustle isn't perceived, again, against a competitor or is infringing on time for what you have in terms of your job description at work. So as long as you're not using company resources, okay, MYB, you're not using company resources, you're not printing on their printers, and you're not using excessive time on your personal email and stuff like that on their computers and all this type of thing, feel free to share it. Now, do you want your boss and coworkers and all them all in your business? No, I'm not saying that. I'm talking about when you're looking to go to another company, share with them your side hustle. It shows that you've got innovation, and you never know. One of the things that's happened too, that's on the positive side, because there's not the loyalty and things like that, many companies are becoming more innovative. They know it's going to be a short relationship. People don't want to, in this environment, people don't want to get married to things. People don't want to get married to each other. They don't want to nobody wants everything. Everything's a monthly subscription, right? Everybody wants month to month rent. Don't own rent. People rent each other in these relationships. And y'all know I'm telling the truth. People rent each other. They rent houses. Everybody wants to rent. Nobody wants to own it. I don't want to be responsible for the maintenance. I don't want the expense of the cost. And so because of that, companies tend to be, at least some of the more progressive ones, they'll be more open to what you're doing because they may look to create a hybrid position that you may really enjoy, where you do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, particularly with what you're doing in your side hustle. But if they don't know that's what you do, and all they see is your resume of these bullet points of, did this, did that, led this, blah, 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 blah. Those aren't getting read because they're only spending seconds reading resumes. So if you got that on your resume and you got it on your cover letter, I mean, that can open, you never know how that can open up the door, not just for you to have another job, because that's what derails your careers, when you feel like you're just in a job and you're not in a career. So to rev up your career, include the things that you enjoy doing and tie them in truthfully and yet creatively into your background. And if y'all do that, I think you'll find some great positives that can come from that. Tread lightly, but look for the positives in what you guys are doing. Okay. So I saw that this week, and I talked to some people in my consulting that have, side hustles. Some people have been able to transition that into full-fledged businesses, which is great. Other people have looked to keep it just as what it is. And that's great too. We're not here to judge anything. We just want to help you be better. And so take this, share it with somebody else, NYB. I hope this has been helpful information from your guy, Champ Ron. I'm not going to steer you wrong. I'm going to tell you the truth, how it comes. I'm not going to filter it out, but, just know, staying on your job 5, 10, 15 years is not going to give you the return that you're looking for. And those are prime years that you won't get back. You're not going to get back. If you got to leave to go to another city, you can always come back. Whatever city that you're in ain't going anywhere. It's been around for however long it's going to be, and it's going to be around after that. But your prime years are precious. Don't waste them with a company that doesn't appreciate you. Right? Thank y'all so much for your attentive ear. Make sure you check out the mybpodcast.com. Make sure you check out onabinge.com for all exclusive content. Connect with me, Ron, at the mybpodcast.com. Share this all across. Give us a 5-star rating on Apple and across the different platforms, Spotify, YouTube, that sort of thing. That helps the reach of the show, helps us connect with more people, and helps us bring more entrepreneurship, real estate, trending news where there's no business like minding your own. This is Champ Ron signing off. Friday, August the 9th. We'll be back next week with more the Minding Your Business podcast. Go be great.